Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar on how to reduce your running costs by cutting down your energy bills. My name is Sarah and I work at the Carbon Trust Wales office based in Cardiff, and I'll be talking you through our top tips for how to save energy in the workplace, which will not only lower your bills but also help you to do your bit for the environment too by reducing your carbon emissions. We understand that although managing carbon emissions is top of the agenda for us, it's not the same for everyone. This session will talk you through the practical things you can do to decrease the cost of your bills, helping to reduce the overall cost of your operations. Before we begin, what are the key drivers to looking at energy efficiency projects? First and foremost, energy reduction projects produce cost savings for your organisation. Secondly, the results of your programs and projects will reduce your impact on the environment, and you can use this to promote your activities. Thirdly, energy projects can help you to comply with regulations and requirements. Particularly in Wales, our government has put some ambitious legislation in place, such as the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Although the requirements may not directly be relevant to you in all cases, this shows how our government sees our country moving forward, and sustainability is very much part of the big picture. The following other topics we'll be going through today will just be touching on each of the key opportunities for energy reduction. So later on, we'll give you some guidance on where to go for more information, and we'll also talk you through a few key case studies of what other third sector organisations are doing to reduce their energy bills. There'll be a chance at the end for you to ask questions, so if you do think of anything as we're running through, please just type your question into the box to the right of your screen that hopefully you can see right now, and we'll do our best to answer you at the end. So let's get started. Our first topic is understanding your bills. Before you can start thinking about how you can save money on your energy bills, you need to make sure that someone in your organisation is responsible for managing them and has the knowledge they need to make sure they're accurate. Ask your supplier to install a smart meter if you don't already have one. This will not only mean that you can get accurate bills as readings are automatically sent to your supplier, but you can also get current and historical information on your energy use once it's been installed. You can see how much energy you've used throughout the day and start looking out for usage spikes, then monitor the impact of changes and improvements you make. Plus, for a lot of small businesses, smart meters are completely free. You could even think about getting a plug-in meter so you can see how much individual pieces of equipment use. Here's an example of what the information you get from a smart meter could look like. It will allow you to look at when you're using energy and how much. Are you using lots of energy overnight or at lunchtime? What could this mean? Are your staff leaving things on when they leave? Smart meter data gives you the power to understand your energy use so you can plan and monitor changes. If you can see the outcome of the great work you and your staff have done, maybe you could even reward them with a small incentive. We often find that little things like a free breakfast or lunchtime pizza delivery or something like that can be a great way to get people engaged. Next up, we've got behaviour. Once you've worked out what you're paying for energy and when that energy is being used, what do you do next? Before you start thinking about what equipment you can change, there are plenty of things you can do working with your staff and even any visitors you may have to reduce your energy bills. We'll talk about some of these over the next few sections. To really get your staff on board, we find that writing a good policy, setting out what you aim to achieve with some clear and fair targets can really help motivate people to get involved, as well as the pizza we already mentioned. Also, when you're looking to buy new or replacement equipment, make sure you've thought about the cost of running it as well as the upfront cost. Make sure you're really getting the best value for money. Writing a buy smart strategy can help get this message across to staff. Next up, we've got insulation. Did you know more than a fifth of the heat in your building is lost through your roof? Well thought out insulation can make a huge difference to your heating bill by stopping some of this loss. Drafty windows and doors will add to the heat loss from the building, and simple changes such as adding draft proofing are often forgotten about. Is the pipework in your building insulated? Easily removable products are now available that will allow ongoing access to valves. Remember also that a well-insulated building stays cooler in summer. There's not only heating that you can save on, but air conditioning too, if you happen to have that. An additional benefit to good insulation is the reduced moisture level in the air, which can help prevent damp issues, as long as there's good airflow in and out of the building. Controls for your heating system. The next thing you can think about is the heating for your building. Does someone know how the heating system works? It does sound silly, but we often find that a boiler is left running all the time just because everyone thought that someone else was dealing with it. Find out how to control the timer on the boiler, so that heating only comes on when you really need it. Overheating by 1 degree Celsius can increase energy consumption by 8%. You can also think about something called balancing the system. This means using the controls on the radiators themselves to restrict the flow to the units nearest the boiler, and as such allowing enough heat to get the radiators furthest away from the boiler, as shown in the picture. Boilers over 15 years old tend not to be condensing, so we recommend replacing systems over this age with a new, more efficient option. Payback will typically be about 8 to 12 years. It's worth also taking note of if your staff are using portable heaters. The cost of running these can be really high, and their use is a good indicator if you need to rethink your heating controls. Being energy efficient isn't about making your staff uncomfortable after all. We even find that getting each of your staff members a nice company-branded jumper or jacket to help keep them warm can really boost morale and help the case for turning down the heating. Next, we've got lighting. This is potentially one of the more expensive opportunities that we'll be talking about, but will usually pay back really quickly, so it's definitely worth looking at, even if you have to do it in small stages, as the cost of lighting your building, especially offices, can be up to half of your total electricity use. There are plenty of things you can do to reduce the cost of your lighting without spending money. Remember to open blinds and turn lights off if you can get enough natural daylight into the building. Look to remove some light bulbs or tubes where possible, like in the bottom left picture here, if an area is overlit. And make sure light isn't blocked by cupboards or racking. It's amazing how often we see that. Another key thing is to make sure staff know which switches turn off which lights. Sometimes people just leave lights on simply because they don't actually know where the switch is, or they're worried that they're going to turn off the wrong light and leave everyone in darkness when they didn't mean to. Then, once you've maximised your no-cost savings, the next step is to look at replacing old, inefficient lights with new, efficient ones, such as LEDs. LEDs use very little energy and last much longer than conventional lights, such as fluorescents. So not only will you see savings of up to 70% of your lighting energy costs, but you will also save on maintenance, as the lamps won't need to be changed as often. To maximise savings, it may also be beneficial to install sensors that will control the lights. They can go off when no one is around or when there is enough daylight coming into the building, and it's best to install these when you change your lights to save on install costs. If you're not in a position to be able to replace all your lights in one go, it could be suitable for you to replace one fitting at a time, as and when they fail. It will cost more in the long run, but if you can't get access to capital, this will allow you to incrementally reduce your energy costs. A lot of workplaces have fluorescent lights. These are efficient, aren't they? Well, no, not always. Older fluorescents tend not to last more than about 15,000 hours, which is kind of 2 full years on, and can use quite a lot of energy. Depending on the type of fitting you have, in a lot of cases you can simply arrange for a qualified electrician to change the older, larger tubes, known as T8s, for smaller, more efficient alternatives called T5s. These use much less energy than the older models, but this is still more than an LED equivalent would use, and LEDs do last much longer. However, LED projects do tend to cost more upfront, so you need to think about whether you need a project to be low cost upfront or whether you're keen on reaping long-term benefits. So why do people think LEDs are so good? Aside from the fact that they cost very little to run because they use so little energy, there are lots of benefits to LEDs. They last for upwards to 50,000 hours, depending on the type, so your maintenance costs decrease when you change to these. They can be easily controlled and don't mind being repeatedly switched off and on, where something like a metal halide would not be happy with this. Another big benefit is they now come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, different brightness levels and different colour temperatures. Long gone are the days where a room lit by LEDs feels like an operating theatre. Still not convinced? Let's take a look at how much it would cost to have a halogen spotlight compared to an LED equivalent. Firstly, when you buy the bulb, the LED is admittedly likely to be more than twice the price, but after that things start looking up for the LED. While the halogen will last about 2,000 hours, remember there are 8,760 hours total in a year, The equivalent LED will last about 24,000 hours at least. Multiplying the wattage rating by the number of hours will give you the number of kilowatt hours used in this time period. Assuming an electricity cost of about 15p per kilowatt hour, the halogen will cost 10 times as much to run for the same period. Also, as the halogen won't last as long, you have to take into account the cost of replacement lamps. So there we have it. The halogen costs nearly 9 times as much to buy and use than the LED. This next section is about small electricals. The energy used in small electricals is often overlooked, but it can easily add up. Printers and photocopiers cost more to run than you think, especially if they don't automatically switch off. Be wary of automatic controls on photocopiers though. If they turn off too quickly, then they can end up using more energy than if they were left running, as the ramp-up energy usage can be quite high. Think about creating a checklist to remind people to turn off equipment, and consider using plug-in timers to turn things off automatically. If your vending machine only stores food and drink that doesn't need to be kept cool all the time, like drinks cans or crisps, that kind of thing, think about whether this can be turned off overnight and at weekends. Remember also that small things add up. Boiling more water than you need or running a half-empty dishwasher all contributes. If this happens a lot, it could be useful to run a poster campaign to remind people what to do at the actual source of the high energy use. Now we'll move on to opportunities for generating your own power or heat. These may not be suitable for all of you right now, but we think it's really useful to know what the main options are. Once you think you've reduced your energy usage down as much as possible, it may be a good time to think about installing renewable power. A small-scale solar photovoltaic, known as a PV, installation, which can be set up on your roof to turn energy from the sun into electricity, will usually pay back in about 8 to 10 years and will supply electricity to your site for about 25 years. Small-scale wind generation will usually take a little longer to pay back and may face planning queries, but can be a great public statement about how environmentally friendly you want to be as an organisation. These projects are big investments, so not necessarily right for everyone, but as supplier competition has increased over the years, prices have gone down, making generating your own clean power more viable. It's not just electricity you can generate. What about producing your own heat through renewable resources? This could be a biomass boiler where you store renewably sourced solid fuel, such as wood pellets on site, to be used as fuel in a special hot water boiler. Solar thermal, where radiation from the sun heats water tubes on your roof, which is then piped into the building, or either ground or air source heat pumps, a technology that has actually been around for more than 30 years, where heat is drawn from the ground or from the air, and the unit acts effectively as a fridge in reverse. If you're not in a position where you can generate your own heat or electricity, you can make a big impact on your carbon emissions by purchasing green electricity and gas. This is where a supplier guarantees that the equivalent energy you purchase is added to the grid from a renewable source, such as solar or wind power if it's electricity. The best bit is that in most cases now, renewable power doesn't cost much more than non-renewable, and sometimes it's actually the same price. Next time your contract is due for renewal, ask your supplier and others for a renewable quote and see for yourself. Alternatively, you could look into whether there are any community schemes that you could get involved in. For example, where a local partnership generates power or heat that you can then purchase. Now let's have a look at a few case studies. Our first case study comes from Promo Cymru, who operate the Ebbw Vale Institute, an arts and cultural hub in the centre of Ebbw Vale. After receiving guidance on what the key opportunities were via Welsh Government, they replaced low-efficiency lighting, such as fluorescents, with high-efficiency LED lighting across most of the building, and added light control sensors to areas that are often unoccupied, such as toilets and corridors. For this project, the Institute spent about £5,000, and it's saving them around £1,500 every year. They also improved insulation on pipework, encouraged staff to turn equipment off and think about their energy usage behaviour, and carried out measures to reduce their water usage. In future, they plan to replace more of their lights with LEDs, and they're even thinking about installing solar photovoltaic panels outside of their building. The second case study that we have comes from the internationally recognised organisation, the YMCA. There are branches across the whole world, including many in Wales. In Cardiff, there are a number of hostels run by the YMCA, and some of these have recently had reviews carried out to establish the best opportunities for energy reduction at each site. A number of varying opportunities have been suggested, ranging from quick fixes, such as cleaning the condensers on fridges, through to longer-term projects, such as solar power generation. These 3 sites have a current annual energy spend of nearly £40,000, and the opportunities suggested would allow them to save almost a third of this figure. Our final case study comes from a Grade 2 listed Georgian building managed by the National Communities Resource Centre. Because of its listed status, the charity was restricted on what it could do with the building, but they still managed to achieve a huge amount of savings by working to find solutions that would meet all parties' requirements. We've listed each of the projects they carried out, and the combined outcome of all of these is an overall energy reduction of 16%. 45% of their energy now comes from renewable resources, and they've had other benefits from the project too. They're able to market their property as a green venue. The building is more comfortable to be in because the temperature management is so much better. And also the work highlighted wider maintenance works that needed doing to keep the building in good condition. Over 10 years, they've managed to reduce their carbon footprint by 50%. Next up, we've got some information about the support that's available. There's a list here of some of the many organisations that you can go to for further support. We've put a lot of information on here, so I suggest you go back to this page once the slides have been made available on the WCVA website. And while you're there, don't forget to check out the free resource efficiency tool, which will help you assess how your organisation is currently doing and what else you could do in the future to save on energy, waste and water costs. We've now come to the end of the presentation, and we hope you've picked up some useful information along the way, from understanding how much energy you use to different ways of saving energy in your buildings and cutting your running costs, to thinking about renewable energy sources and hearing about what others in the third sector have done and plan to do. We do have some time for questions, so if you have got any more that you haven't already typed in, please feel free to type them in the box right now and we'll do our best to respond. So let's have a quick look at what we had. We've got a couple here. So the first one says, is it always a good idea to install control sensors for lighting? So quite often we find that people think that if you're going to be changing your lighting, you might as well just pay the extra and just chuck a load of sensors in as well, just in case. However, I think it's a good idea to step back and think, okay, do I really need them at my site? So it may well be that your staff are really good at turning the lights off all the time. You've kind of always got them off when the blinds are open, and that they're generally quite good at looking after that. That could mean that they're not going to get much of a benefit from installing sensors as well, because the lights aren't going to be off any more than they currently are. So if you're already really good at managing that, there's not really much need for you to add extra cost to the project. However, if there is a chance that you've got, say, lots of staff and they quite often do forget to turn things off, then it can definitely be worth adding that little bit of extra cost onto your project. Or just, if you're not going to be changing your lights, think about just installing sensors. It can be kind of a few £100 project to get a few of those in a small office rather than having to directly go to change your lights straight away, and that can give you some really good savings. Okay, second question that we have, second question we have then is, how do I work out how ambitious my energy targets should be? So this is another one that's quite difficult, that reasonably, if you give yourself a target that's really hard, it's going to be quite difficult for you to achieve that, and then potentially at the end of that target period you could kind of effectively lower the morale of your staff if you go a little bit too over the top and you get too ambitious. So what we would suggest is, first of all, if you know you're going to be doing a project that's if you know you're doing a project that's going to save a certain amount of money, you've had a contractor in and they've told you how much that's going to be, then it's worth putting that kind of saving into your target, so you've got something directly to put in there. However, if you're doing something like behaviour change, something like that, it's always better to start small, make people feel, yeah, we've done a great job at this, say maybe 1 or 2% over a year period. Make sure you've got the process in place to be able to manage manage your kind of bills and see how much you're actually using, and then go from there. So next question, we've got one that says, is it still considered better to run the heating at a low temperature when the centre is closed at the weekend? So this is an interesting one, and I've heard quite a few times actually that people think that if you leave it on a low temperature all weekend, that's better for an energy perspective. If you're looking kind of over the winter at kind of keeping it at a kind of reasonable temperature to make sure that your pipes don't freeze, yeah, that's great. But if it's a case of there's no one in all weekend and you're just running the boiler, kind of no one there, just at a lower temperature, we would always suggest that just kind of, if you can, either turn it down really, really, really low or turn it off completely. If it's not using any energy, that's the best case scenario. You're just going to make sure that you look at the wider impacts of what you're doing. That's not going to affect any of the pipe work or anything like that. What good alternatives are there to double glazing if you can't get planning permission to change the windows? So this is another difficult one. If you've got a listed building and you can't change your windows, or if it's just a very expensive thing you can do, I would definitely suggest firstly looking at the insulation that you already have around the windows. It could be little things, just putting a small amount of additional insulation around the window, make sure you've not got any leakage. And then also looking at kind of solar gain reflection sheets. You can get like a sheet that you can put on that reflects light. It kind of it makes the window shiny effectively, that you can get those professionally put on. That shouldn't cost too much money, and not only will they reflect kind of sun out, but they keep the heat in a little bit better. So we would definitely recommend, if you can get the money together, to replace the windows if you do have, say, single glazing or particularly old double glazing. But it is quite a large cost. So definitely think about the insulation that's there. So I think that looks like that's all the questions we've had so far. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed that. If you want any more information, you can visit the WCVA website or the Carbon Trust website, and I've just listed each of those on there. So we hope you have a very good day, and thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.